Thanks for starting your morning with us. Hello, coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Lee Ji-yoon. On today's Business Daily, the Japanese yen continues on its weakening trend while the Korean won is gaining sharply. We take a closer look at how this is all affecting the Korean economy. Deflation concerns are also showing their heads again, and this combined with slipping exports and low growth present a bleak outlook. The Korean government is going to try to ink its free trade agreement with China next month. Deputy Trade Minister and Chief Free Trade Negotiator Woo Tae-ih said in a briefing that he was working with his Chinese counterparts for an official signing of the trade pact in the month of May, with Seoul seeking to implement it before the end of the year. He said a free trade pact with Vietnam is also set to be signed. Under the Korea-China FTA, Seoul will lift tariffs on 79% of products imported from China within the following decade, while China will waive taxes on 71% of goods it ships in from Korea. On the note of exports, the outlook this year for compact products such as home appliances and foodstuff looks bright. But it's clouds and overcast skies for heavy industries such as steel and shipbuilding. That's the market sentiment according to a survey of some 500 exporting firms by the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In terms of the Export Outlook Index, petrochemical and petroleum products recorded among the lowest, hit by low global crude prices in the first quarter. Around 32 million Koreans are expected to travel during the extended May holiday that will span from May 1st to the 5th. About 450,000 Koreans are expected to travel abroad during the 5-day period, with 30% planning on going to China, Japan, or Southeast Asia. A survey conducted by the Korea Transport Institute on 5,000 households, the most popular reason for travel was for tourism and leisure, followed by celebrations for Parents' Day and Children's Day. The 2 days fall within or shortly after the 5-day window. Despite government efforts to turn around the economy, it's still showing feeble signs of recovery. Instead, deflation concerns are showing their heads again, not helped by a warning light on the country's main growth engine, exports. Our Eunice Kim reports.
Overall growth, consumer prices, and now exports. All three are working hand in hand against a much-desired revived economy as the government's 3.8% growth goal for this year is looking to be more and more improbable. The Bank of Korea has already cut its growth projection from 3.4% down closer to 3%. Similar sentiments over at the IMF. It slashed Korea's growth outlook by nearly half a percentage point earlier this month. And the picture is no prettier over in consumer prices. In January, consumer price inflation was just short of 2%. Within 3 months, that figure fell by a full percentage point. And when factoring in the government's cigarette price hike at the start of the year, the growth may as well be in the 0% range.
If low prices and slow growth continue, it will drag down inflation projections, and this will lead to higher possibilities of entering deflation.
Add to the mix Korea's exports. They're poised to dip for a fourth consecutive month in April at a rate deeper than the 4.3% fall recorded in March. That would make it the longest contraction Korean exports have seen since the 2008 global financial crisis. It's a depressed picture that's looking more and more likely amid China's growth policy shift that will focus more on growing its consumer market away from export-oriented policies. And there's also added pressure from the depreciating yen, making Korea's products less competitive in the global market in the many overlapping export categories, including cars, home appliances, petrochemicals, and semiconductors. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Now Now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been taking aggressive monetary action, printing more yen to revive the Japanese economy. And this has all been leading to a slide in its value. Now, how is this affecting the Korean economy? Let's find out.
The Korean won hit a 7-year high against the Japanese yen last week, trading a little above the 900 won to 100 yen mark. Just 3 years ago, the won reached its weakest level to the yen at more than 1,500 won, but it has been strengthening since against the Japanese currency. Experts point to massive quantitative easing carried out under Tokyo's so-called Abenomics for the weakening yen, and it is becoming a great source of concern to Korean exporters. Korea's outbound shipments have already seen a slide, losing to competition in Japan. How big a threat does the weak yen pose to the Korean economy, and how should Seoul respond to these changes?
And to tell us more about this, we're now joined by Professor Shin Se-don of Sungmyung Women's University. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
All right, so it looks like Japan's efforts definitely paid off for its exporters, but looking at the Japanese economy as a whole, has the weak yen really provided the growth that it needs?
Well, if you look at stock market in Japan, the Nikkei index reached over 20,000. For almost several years. And also economic growth rate in Japan was 1.4% the last quarter, but it jumped up to 2.2% this quarter. So economic growth in the stock market, and also if you go to Japan, you will see, hundreds of thousands of tourists from all over the world. So tourism industry is pretty good in Japan. So in every aspect, trade, growth, tourism, even in the infra investment industries, every facets of the Japanese economy, you will see a very dramatic recovery and confidence.
Okay, so I guess Japan, it's most likely that Japan will continue with its monetary easing policy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, the fueling that response is that China, because Chinese economy has been slumping lately, so the China is conducting a very active monetary policy of its kind. So kind of reactive reactions from Japan and China and so on. So I think that Japan will continue quantitative easing for the time being.
Okay, well, turning to the exchange rate, in contrast to the weakening yen, the Korean won has been strengthening.
Right.
What's the reason behind this continued strength?
Prime reason, I think, is the huge current account surplus. Current account surplus last year was almost $90 billion. Considering the size of Korean economy, $90 billion is a very big number, and it's been increasing recently. So the prime reason for stronger Korean currency against the dollar is the current account, and also the stock market prospect has been so good that you expect a lot of foreign capitals flowing into Korea. So current account surplus and also capital account surplus, those two factors contribute to very strong Korean currency against dollar.
Well, if the yen continues to weaken, then it's surely going to pose some major threats to Korean exporters.
Right.
What is the Korean government can do about this?
Well, contrary to the Japanese government, which has been conducting very active monetary and exchange rate policy, Korean policy, to be honest, should say that, they are conducting kind of benign neglect. In other words, Korean government traditionally has been thinking that exchange rate is the outcome in the free foreign exchange market. So non-intervention stance has been the Korean government policy for the time being. But there has been some mention that from the government that if the 1 yen rate continues to slipping down below 900 level, we might expect some kind of intervention in the market.
Well, turning our shift a bit. The weak yen also seems to be affecting the Korean tourism industry as well. Could the weak yen hamper Korea's efforts to attract more Chinese and Japanese tourists?
Of course, for Chinese, for Italian, for the Americans, it's become very less expensive for them to travel around Japan instead of Korea. So you will see a lot of, Chinese people working around, traveling around Korea, but I think that there a substantial portion of Chinese tourists are switching, to Japan because Japan has become very less expensive, very cheap, for them to travel.
Okay, well, going back in time a bit, this isn't really the first time that Korea has been affected by the weak yen or been so-called shocked by the weak yen. Can you tell us to what degree the Korean economy was impacted by the weak yen back then?
Well, to our surprise, there has been about 4 major weakening of yen against Korean currency, one in 1980s, one in mid-1990, and one in late 2000, and the current ones. Every previous, 1 yen depreciation ends up with a kind of crisis. IMF crisis, one of that. The more surprise is that the current pace of 1 yen depreciation is the fastest among others. So that's what worries me in the sense that, down the road this year, I think the export performance is a lot worse than the first quarter, which has been about 10% negative growth, this year. So I think, we have to see further, worsening of trade in Korea. So that worries me very much.
Well, considering that this time things are not looking very good, how should the government combat Japan's aggressive monetary easing policy then?
Well, we have to follow equal kind of a policy. If Japan is conducting a quite active quantitative easing, we should follow similar kind. And I think, the government is trying to change previous policy of benign neglect into quite active, intervention in exchange market, at least in order to prevent the further downing of 1 yen rate below 900.
Okay. All right, I guess we'll have to keep a close eye on what the Korean government is going to do from here on out. Thanks for coming in today, Professor.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for now. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time, same place. Until then, bye-bye.